Now let's get into the fun stuff, the Gore, so let's begin with the new system you have for wounds and dismemberment.
Yeah. So it's a funny thing we talked previously about HouseWare, because otherwise I obviously don't know how HouseWare is doing it, because as far as I've seen, every match is doing it in a very different way, but all ways are valid. But the way I'm doing it is probably similar. So what I'm doing is, let's say you're swinging a sword, and that sword is making a connection with the body of an enemy, and at that point I'm sort of freezing the enemy's body in place. I'm searching for the closest vertex on the body of the creature you've just hit, and find it. And the first thing which I forgot to mention is that in your modeling software, such as, for example, I use Blender, I bake the positions of vertices into the unused UV channels of the model. So, because if you're doing skin meshes, then at runtime, if, for example, you want to know the real position of where that vertex was, you can't, because what you're getting there is already the position which has been modified by the skinning process. But like this, I can find that vertex, which is the nearest to the one I've hit, and read the position of that vertex, the original position, not the skin position. And then at that position, I can just go ahead and inform my voxel grid that at that position inside the grid, a hit has happened with this magnitude and this direction. So I mentioned the voxel grid now, but I haven't really explained it previously. If you're using, for example, Unity, I'm not sure what the Godot or Unreal Engine equivalent to it would be, but for each uncalled creature, I'm keeping 3D render texture in memory, which is a pretty low resolution render texture. It doesn't have to be huge, because, for example, imagine a human standing right next front of you in T-pose, and then you slice it up into, for example, 32 little cubes. Then even if you take one little cube, that's still a pretty nice size, and because that would be the minimal granularity of your wounds, of what your wounds can be. Obviously, the higher resolution you go, the more detailed wounds you can do, but it obviously comes with costs.
It actually doesn't have to be hugely high res, because I was just like for an upcoming video, I was watching the Dead Island 2 tech presentation on the Gore system. I'll send it over to you.
Oh.
And they basically mentioned they also have a low res texture for the damage. They mentioned pretty much exactly that.
Oh wow, I haven't seen that, but I was researching a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I'll actually find it right now.
Awesome, thanks. What I found while I was researching was actually what the stuff Left 4 Dead developers have been doing. I've found.
I saw that one.
Yeah. So that was a bit of a help as well, but I couldn't really go that way. But in the end, I've settled with these 32 by 32 by 32 render textures, so a 3D grid, which is essentially how these voxel grids would be set up. Oh, thanks for the link. So now we know the position and the direction of the hit. Then I convert that position and direction to the space of the voxel grid, and then using a compute shader, I send the position, direction, magnitude of the hit, and then draw with a specific color onto that render texture. This render texture has an R, G, and B and A channels, so 4 channel, and I'm using each channel for different effects. For example, the R channel I'm using for normal wounds. These would be based on magnitude. So if it's a channel goes from 0 to 1, and if it would be around 0.5, then it would appear as a bruise. But the closer you get to 1, it would become an open wound at that area inside the model. And since it's volumetric, this can also cause holes in the enemies, which I haven't yet showcased, because I still need to create the the innards and the skeleton, which is going to be inside the characters.
Will it happen in the upcoming demo or afterwards?
It's probably going to be afterwards, but even in this current demo, you'll be able to see wounds which are actually 3D. But because the way I'm doing it is that I'm taking, the human model, which I already had, but I'm rendering it again in a little bit shrinked manner with a muscle texture underneath it. And then where those wounds are the deepest, I cut out the alpha of the normal human, and then the muscle underneath becomes visible. And basically the innards and the skeletons are going to be even more layers, so that if the wound is even deeper, then I'm going to be cutting away the alpha of the muscle as well. And then, for example, the guts would become visible at the abdomen. But if we go even deeper, then the bone would be visible. So I think it's pretty much similar to how Left 4 Dead did it, but there they actually filled the hull of the hole itself. But in Sword Hero, I sort of have the liberty of, in a sense, getting away with things because my models are low fidelity and they can look pretty convincing with even with just alpha cut out. So as I was saying, the red channel is the bruises and the wounds. As far as I remember, I made the green channel the burns. So the burns are gonna have a completely different appearance to them. And the blue is gonna be something which I call curse, which is gonna be wound which you cannot heal by natural means, but you'll be able to, but have to use a sort of magical item to dispel these curses from your body. And so these are gonna look, pretty nasty, like such as hives or something like that. And then I'll still have one channel left for if something else, for example, whatever I might need in the future. I didn't want to use it yet.
Well, for example, like perhaps characters wearing heavy clothes or armor?
Armor is using these same things, for example, but it's a completely separate model laid on top of the characters' models, but they are reading this voxel texture as well. So they are aware, for example, if there's a wound. And since I didn't want to introduce, for example, armor durability, I'm not actually damaging the armor visibly, but instead making the wounds underneath seep blood through the clothes and the cracks of armor and whatnot. So even if you wear armor, you can see that you have a wound somewhere. And well, it of course produces an icon on the HUD, which is blinking to let you know that you have a wound, but it's also represented on your character as well.
And it would be visualized on enemies? Like you're fighting an armored human, and what's gonna be the visualization for hitting that armor?
Oh, for the armor itself? Well, each thing in Sword Hero which has a health, for example, even from the little bugs on the ground to each individual item to crates and props and whatever, everything has this item component. And in this item component, I can tell what quote unquote material that thing is made out of. And for armors, I can just go to my drop down and tell that this armor is made of metal. Then if you hit that thing, then it's gonna produce a different sound and a different VFX. But if the armor is not on that body part, then it's just gonna get marked as flesh, in which case I can tell it that what color that flesh is, and that color is gonna be driving the color of the meat inside the creature. For example, I have giant bugs which are obviously don't have red blood, but they have this orange goo inside them, and their flesh too is orange. And
that was gonna be actually the next question. So non-human enemies, so you also be able to expose their insides and do all of that Gore stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going for. And also you can decapitate them as well. However, with non-human enemies, there are some other cases. For example, a bug has 6 legs. So if you cut off a leg of a giant insect, then it will still come at you, but I can set a threshold that if the bug still has at least 4 legs, then, because 4 means that it definitely has at least one on whichever side, then it can still come at you. But if it goes below that, then the bug is just going to, crash down and just pull itself on the ground. And another thing with that is that some creatures are going to have these special body parts, which if you cut off during combat, then they would become an item that you can pick up from the ground. And these items might not be able, you might not be able to acquire these items otherwise. And they might be valuable or...
Can you kill a creature with its own body part?
Well, yeah, all body parts will be liftable, so for sure you can cut off the front arm of a bug, which it uses to attack you, lift that object, and then just, throw it at it or whatever. You can't yet hit with items you've lifted, but I might as very well be adding that because it sounds like something interesting. It's just hard to come up with a way to calculate the damage for these body parts in a sense that the player can know what to expect from it. Because right now, for example, with throwing, I'm using a very simple damage formula, so it doesn't, confuse everyone what's happening. So if you have telekinesis, then your arcane stat is going to be the base damage, and if you don't have telekinesis, then your strength stat is going to be the base damage. And plus, if you're lifting something which is a weapon, so for example, if you lift up a sword that you want to throw it, if you throw a sword, it's also gonna, spin in the air, not just fly as a physics object. And it's gonna deal the base damage, so your strength plus the actual damage of that weapon. It's very simple, but I've found it to be the one which works the best, and it's a pretty logical, followable formula.
So you have mentioned dismemberment and prosthetics, so how that's gonna work?
It's a bit different for each body part. For example, of course, there won't be prosthetic heads. So your head, for example, is you. That's your own thing. But as for limbs, the legs are a bit different because if you lose a leg, then you'll be crawling on the ground. And since Sword Hero is not like Kenshi, so it's a third-person game, you can't really speed up time to crawl faster. So instead, what I'm doing is that if you lose a leg, you have to crawl into safety, and if for a set amount of seconds you are safe, so out of combat, then the screen will fade out and you will wake up at the nearest physician. Physicians are gonna be these mechanical contraptions. You might have seen the trailer as well. These sort of robot things which are coming off from the ceiling, and you'll be able to have prosthetics installed onto your body at these machines. These can range from, the very simple, these tier 1, tier 2, very simple prosthetics which you can even buy in towns or find wherever. They aren't really a big deal, but there will also be rare prosthetics or even legendary ones which you can find at very dangerous places around the world. And you can also use a physician to install these prosthetics onto you. It's a bit different with an arm because...
So kind of like perhaps chop off your own leg because the prosthetic is kind of more badass?
Oh yeah, there will be still still option to do that, so you don't have to naturally lose your limb, especially because in the initial game it's going to be hard to actually survive losing a limb because your limbs are actually going to have more durability than you yourself. So the only way to lose a limb until you're like level 10 is to have your limb damaged, and then drink a health potion to bring your main health up, and then have that limb hit again because healing potions don't heal your limbs. Your limbs can only heal by as time passes, so naturally or by resting. So that would be one way, but if you want to have your limb chopped off by a physician and to be replaced as a prosthetic because you want to, that would cost more gold by its keeper than usually is, to go into that. So losing your limb in a natural way is free, but if you want to have to replace it actually, then you'll have to reach into your pockets, especially at the beginning of the game. The amount it will cost would be pretty expensive, which of course you can then steal back from the shopkeeper, but that's another thing.
So let's talk about the blood spitting features. And I believe I saw the effector is supposed to be lasting mass, so bodies remain and perhaps even blood too.
Yeah, so blood is not disappearing on its own. There is a set amount of blood droplets that can be, which I'll tie to a graphics setting in the future. But the way it works is by utilizing the BRG system in Unity, the batch renderer group, and the jobs systems. So basically, it's not a decal in the traditional sense. Well, not in the traditional sense, but in the Unity sense. So it's not a Unity decal component, but I've made my own decal shader, which based on the screen position and the normal, which is seen there from the G buffer, I can calculate or project how the decal would be on that surface. So pretty much how decals work by default, it's just my own implementation, so I can use it through the BRG system. So they are technically cubes, which represent the volume of the decal. And using BRG, it's a sort of like instancing, so very similar to how, for example, grass is rendered in many games. And this allows me to have even like 50,000 individual blood droplets at any time, and it still would only cost like a millisecond or so per frame, which is big. But if you were using the Unity decal system would for 50,000 individual decals of blood, then it would sort of just kneel over and die. So that's it. That's one thing about it. I'm using the same system for Gibbs as well. So if these little meat pieces are flying around, and they can stick on walls and wherever, and they don't disappear either. Also, corpses don't disappear either, and body parts, but instead they will decompose as time passes, and using the same wound system I mentioned before by
Oh, nice, yeah.
So instead of adding individual wounds, I'm just setting the base red channel from 0 to slowly the whole thing to 1. So eventually the whole body is going to become a big wound in a sense, and then eventually that too is going to fade out, and you are left with the skeleton only, which can stay there pretty much forever because it's there anyways. And then
people love this feature in RDR too.
Oh yeah, I'm that's another monster at itself, because it's a marvel. Like, I can't even fathom how they could create that game, because and it even how it ran on the base PS4, for example. Like, it's absolute craziness. But it's gonna be actually pretty similar, because you will still need to have these corpses in the game, because in Sword Hero, these things won't just despawn, but they will be there forever, because you'll be able to use them, for example, necromancy. You'd even be able to resurrect something as a temporary minion.
Nice.
Even if it has been dead for a good while. So, yeah, maybe, the beginning of the game you kill some bandits or whatever, and when you visit at the end of the game, they'll still be lying around there, and you'll just raise them to become your little minions until they fall apart. So it's gonna,
I love it.
Yeah, so it's gonna be an interesting thing, and I really can't wait to finally have these things all set up and move, because otherwise the technical side of the alpha is almost completely finished. So I have the majority of these features already set up. I just have to finish some last very big systems, such as the stealth mechanic, for example, which will draw from my custom lighting system, because I'm not using the Unity built-in lighting system, because it didn't really fit my needs. but instead I made my own. And a good pro with this is that I can easily read back the light mount at any given position in the world on the CPU almost instantly, which I'll be able to use to determine, if a creature can see, what it can see, and similar things. And I'll also be able to make this into a combat feature itself. So, for example, you'll be able to cause complete darkness in a room and attack someone, but you'd be able to, for example, drink a potion which allows you to see in complete darkness, but that creature wouldn't be able to see, and he would be just flailing at whatever last position it knows you were at, but you would be seeing him clearly. Although there will be creatures which can see in the dark by default. So I expect this to sort of give some unique scenarios, some interesting encounters in the future.